Welcome to the Real Suits, champions for the injured. We here at Saltz Mongaluzzi Bendesky are trial lawyers. We represent people that are injured due to the negligence or wrongdoing of somebody else, usually corporations. We are going to be using this podcast as a platform to talk to you about who we are and introduce you to some of the people that work with us and are special to us at our firm. And I am so proud to have Jordan Howell, one of our partners today. Jordan is the best dressed lawyer at the firm, a tremendous person, a tremendous lawyer, and I'm so proud that he is our first guest. At the end of this podcast, please let us know if there's something that you like, something you don't like. We want it to be receptive. We want people to enjoy this podcast. We want you to learn about what we do and meet the people that we work with and we are so proud of. Jordan, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Let me start by saying thanks, Larry. I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this. I think we're going to have some fun this afternoon.
Yeah,
So I grew up in Cheltenham, like a lot of lawyers at this firm, including yourself.
that's right.
It seems everywhere we go, we run into Cheltenham lawyers, whether it's here or across the community. But after graduating from Cheltenham, I went to Temple. Thought I wanted to be a police officer at some point in my life. Ended
Your
up
brother's a police officer, correct?
Yeah, my brother is a state trooper. He was based out of Philadelphia for a number of years, and he recently moved out to Ebensburg in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, with his wife, where she's a veterinarian, and that's where their practice is. So, but found my way into law school, went to Drexel, graduated, started my career at the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, tried a bunch of cases there, represented victims of crime, just how we do here. And after doing a little bit of defense work, made my way over to your firm.
So why did you first go to the DA's office?
I think I went there first because of my interest in criminal law. My major in college was criminal justice, and I really did want to be a police officer. But thankfully, I had a good mentor in my life, Danny Silverman. He does PCRA work, and he was a professor at Temple. And I got to talking to him one afternoon, and he basically just said, Jordan, you're a smart guy. If you want to be a cop, that's great. Do it. But go to law school first, and then you can always go back and be a cop later. It's much more difficult to go back to law school later. I took his advice, thankfully. All through law school, I still kind of had that law enforcement mindset. So, natural progression was to go to the DA's office. There, I worked hand in hand with police officers, with victims of crime, and, really seeing some of the darker parts of our city, and being able to represent people that were going through tough times it was a rewarding experience. So it was great. Tried cases, and had great colleagues.
So I was going to ask, how long were you in the DA's office and what did you do there?
I was there about 3.5 years. So everyone there starts in municipal court. So you're trying misdemeanor trials, so like theft, retail theft, simple assault, things like that. And then you kind of work your way up. You go to juvenile. And then the next progression is major felony bench trials, so trials with judges. And then from there, I went to major trials where I was doing jury trials in serious cases like robbery, aggravated assault, attempted murder, things like that. And then toward the end, I went to the Special Investigation Unit, which is a unit that looks at basically anything that the office decides is a priority. One of the goals at the time was to get a handle on police misconduct. So some of our responsibilities in that unit were investigating police officers accused of committing crimes. And, I didn't take that lightly. Someone who, wanted to be a police officer, someone who always worked hand in hand with police officers. So I felt like I was a valuable resource in that unit because I understood, the difficulties of the job and how these guys are going out there and, they're putting their life on the line every day. And but it was good. But like any career, there are bad apples that need to be prosecuted, and we were able to do that, so it was great.
So you mentioned that you tried cases in the DA's office. Do you like trying cases?
Yeah, there's nothing like it. The stress leading up to it makes you question yourself, and why you're there, and why you're putting all this time into it. But once you're in the courtroom, as you know, Larry, it all just gets a little bit more natural, and then it reminds you why you do this job.
So what do you like about it?
Um, I think it's getting on the same page as the jury. You know, it's the whole context of everything we do is what is a jury going to do? How are they going to think about our case? And everything that you do, they're watching, they're listening, they're observing how you interact with the judge, how you interact with defense counsel, how you interact with courtroom staff. So you know, it's being able to put on this almost like a show to persuade the jury to see the evidence your way. And you know, to some extent, it's a popularity contest because, as you know, juries typically rule in favor of victims or plaintiffs that they like, and same goes for the lawyers. So, you know, it's going on and trying to put on a clean case and give your client the best shot that you can.
When you say it's a show, you don't mean it in a you're trying to deceive them way. You're saying in terms of just presenting it in a way that people understand, people can appreciate, and people can be engrossed.
Yeah, I think when I say show, I mean production in the sense that you know, you're putting on evidence, you are coordinating all of your witnesses behind the scenes to get them ready, so that way when one witness comes off, there's another one ready to go. You don't want to waste the jury's time. That's the last thing you want to do. You know, it's using visualizations to further your point. There's so much that goes into a trial that people just don't see. You don't see it when you know you're watching Law and Order and stuff like that. So there's a lot that goes into it, as you know.
Yeah, so I mean, it is interesting. It kind of reminds me of like the analogy of a duck, where you want the jury to see above the surface, and you don't want to see them below the surface, where you're kind of paddling to get your witnesses ready to make sure everything is smooth to what they see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, what they see is ultimately all that matters at the end of the day. But that's just, as you said that, it made me think of this time I was on trial in a case where a man was accused of shooting another man, and one of our eyewitnesses was just, you know, not the type of person you'd want around your children. He had his own long rap sheet, and you know, I got a chance to prep him in a room outside the courtroom before he went on the stand in front of the jury, and he was incarcerated, so he's behind glass, and you know, I'm in there talking to him, and you know, I brought a detective in with me just so we had a witness. But you know, he was going to come in and he didn't want to be a rat because you know he's in jail, and you don't want to be known as a rat when you're in jail. So um, I'm asking him, and I'm basically just telling him, you know, what did you see that day? What did you tell police? We're going through the facts, and he's telling me he didn't see anything. So one of the kind of the tricks of the trade that I learned from one of my supervisors when you have an uncooperative witness is at the end, just make sure you tell them to tell the truth. And I told him 3 or 4 times when we were in that prep, you know, outside the jury, they don't know that I'm in there. I'm just telling him, whatever you do, go in there and tell the truth. Then we get him out on the stand in front of the jury, and he goes up there and he basically tells the complete opposite of what he told police. He says the defendant didn't do it. You know, he doesn't want to be a rat. On cross-examination from the defense lawyer says something like, you know, so everything you said before was made up. You didn't say that, right? And, you know, the witness agrees because he wants to help the defendant. And then the defense lawyer says something like, didn't you even prep with the district attorney before you got on the stand today? Did you speak with him? Yes. What did the DA tell you to say? And the only thing that guy remembered was tell the truth. And the jury looked at me when that happened, and they knew that my case was solid. They knew that I was there for the right reasons, and it resonated with them. And at the end of the day, despite the fact that this witness had completely reversed course on his testimony, said the defendant didn't do it, they understood what was going on behind the scenes, and they found the defendant guilty of a shooting that he actually did, in fact, commit.
Okay. And then you came over to the civil side.
Yeah. That's a tough process in and of itself. You know, when you start in criminal, it's such a different process. You know,
Tell
there's
us
no
about the differences.
yeah, there's no discovery. I mean, in criminal court, you get your file. You're lucky if you know about the case more than a month or two before the trial. You don't get to, you know, take depositions. You don't get to know what everybody's going to say before trial. It's kind of just you walk in there and you put your case on. So when I was interviewing at different firms trying to make the leap, everyone would say, "Oh, you know, we think you're great. You have great trial experience, but you know, you've never taken a deposition. You've never, you know, issued written discovery. You've never responded to a motion for summary judgment." And that was a little frustrating at first, but like any business, enough networking and you find a place to learn the tricks of the trade, to learn how to do the job. I started at a defense firm defending the exact cases that we're now handling. So I learned, how you and your partners at the time were handling these cases, and all of that translated to what I do now.
Well, we're so glad you came. Um, so you mentioned depositions, and I don't know if everybody knows what a deposition is. Why don't you tell us what a deposition is?
Yeah, so a deposition is the lawyer's opportunity to ask questions of a witness to find out what they're going to say if the case goes to trial. The most skilled lawyers, like we do here, are able to ask questions in a way that elicits very favorable testimony for our clients. We use these depositions to show the defense lawyers and the insurance companies that you don't want to take this case to trial, because if you do, your people, the defendants, are going to admit very critical facts that look very bad and show that they are responsible for causing this accident. So they can be used very effectively to put pressure on defendants. And the same for our clients. Our clients are deposed. It's the defense lawyer's opportunity to see how our clients are going to appear in front of a jury. It's their opportunity to really get, for the first time, an understanding of the trauma and the injuries and the difficulties that our clients are going through. And they can be very emotional, but again, they're very powerful in setting up the case before trial.
And at the depositions, people are under oath. The depositions are videotaped. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the videotaping is something that I learned when I started here. We have this rule from you and Bob Mongaluzzi that we videotape every deposition. So as you said, every witness is under oath. It's no different than being in a courtroom in front of a judge or a jury. That is sworn testimony that can be admissible in front of a jury. We can show that testimony in our openings, in our closings. We can show it while the witness is testifying if they change their testimony. So it's sworn under oath testimony, subject to the penalties of perjury, and it really lets the parties evaluate the strengths and the weaknesses of their case before actually getting into the courtroom.
So tell us about some of the cases that you've handled that you've changed people's lives.
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind is one that you and I actually both worked on last year, involving it was a nurse, a CNA, who was heading home after work, and a state trooper unfortunately was speeding down the highway, Belmont Avenue in Philadelphia, and he was going double the speed limit, you'll recall. And he T-boned her vehicle.
Crossed over the double yellow line.
Yeah, yeah. So he claimed he was responding to an emergency. He pulls out of the barracks like a bat out of hell, and is driving on the wrong side of the road, double the speed limit, and T-bones our client. And she was devastated. She had two young kids. She was the sole breadwinner for the family, the only one who worked, and she ended up fracturing vertebrae at C5, C6 in her neck. And she was unable to go back to her job. I mean, she's a nurse. She's got to lift patients. She has to clean. It's a very physical job. And she was unable to provide for her family at that point. She wasn't at work, so there was no workers' compensation benefits. There was no insurance to cover her. So when she came to our firm, she looked to us, in a very dire position. And the interesting thing about that case is when it came in, everybody knew that it was against a state police officer. And so the attorney that sent it to us was under the belief that it would be a capped case, meaning in Pennsylvania, when you sue a government entity, typically the damages are capped. And when it comes to state entities, as you know, Larry, the cap is $250,000.
And just so I can explain that to people, in most cases against the governmental entity, state or city, you can only recover a certain amount of money against the state or city. I know there are law firms, including our own law firm, that are trying to change that law, but that's the law as it stands today, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's 250 with a state entity, and it's 500,000 with a city or a local municipality. And Yeah.
even if somebody is devastatingly injured.
Oh yeah. I mean, a septibus can, run someone over and leave them paralyzed, and essentially they have immunity, and their liability is capped at $250,000. It's remarkable that these caps are still in place at the same level they have been for as far back as I can remember.
How were you able to get around or overcome that cap?
Yeah, at first glance, 250, it sounds like a lot of money, right? $250,000. I mean, that's more money than most people see in a lifetime in one sitting. But, after costs and fees and everything, and when you think about the future of lost wages that this woman had, she's a nurse. She made pretty good money. And when you add that up over the years, that's a lot more than $250,000. And this is something she was looking at like, my life is ruined. I'm not going to be able to provide for my kids for the rest of their lives and for my life. What am I going to do? So, we had to think outside the box in that case because we did not want to have her case capped at $250,000. Ultimately, after doing a lot of research, we found a civil rights claim called a state created danger claim, which allows you to get around the cap. And in that case, the burden is a little bit higher. You have to prove that the conduct of the government actor, the police officer, was so egregious that the cap shouldn't apply, and you can go through the civil rights process. Ultimately, we were successful in that case. You took a deposition of the state trooper where he admitted that at the deposition, that he was required to follow motor vehicle regulations like the speed limit and not crossing over the double yellow when you're not responding to an actual emergency. And you'll recall that he was not the most cooperative witness, which ultimately I think worked against him.
Yeah.
And
He,
shortly
he
after
was
that,
he was arrogant.
he was arrogant. He was pompous. He was arrogant, and I think his attorney recognized it because shortly after that deposition, we went to a settlement conference, and the case resolved within weeks of
Yeah.
that deposition.
Far
So,
in excess of that cap.
oh yeah, it's a public settlement. So that was $1.7 million we were able to recover for that woman, and that changed her life. I mean, I remember getting on the phone with her and telling her what the settlement was going to be, and she cried.
Yeah.
We changed that woman's life, and there's no better feeling and more rewarding part of our career, I think, is when we're able to get such a successful recovery for our clients. I mean, she in the beginning thought that her case was going to be capped at 250, didn't know if she was ever going to even get that. And then we were able to get multitudes of that, and she's taking care of her kids. Her daughter's going to college. She doesn't have to try to fight through the fusion surgery she had on her neck to be a nurse at a assisted living facility. So, it was a great recovery, very rewarding. I'll never forget it.
Well, you gave me some credit, but you put that case together, and you were truly a champion for this injured woman in that case.
I appreciate it. It was a fun case for sure.
And tell me about some of the other cases that you've handled where you've made a difference, truly made a difference in people's lives.
I think one of the more recent ones was a fire that we handled in New Jersey, and that was a tragic case involving an apartment complex. There was a fire, and two people passed away, and two more people were seriously injured jumping out of a window trying to get out of this building. And in that case, it was essentially a slumlord that was running this property. Um, didn't have appropriate smoke detectors, didn't have fire rated doors. They had previously been cited for not having fire rated doors. And then this fire started in the hallway, and smoke started filling up the apartments, and two people passed away, two jumped, suffered very, very serious orthopedic injuries. The two that survived were not English speakers. Very tough for them to get a job and try to move on from something like this when they have such serious injuries. And as a team, this was a real team effort. We were able to put together a great case and get them a recovery very early on that really changed their lives.
You did a great job in that case as well.
Thank you.
So obviously you are very active within the firm. You're handling cases, serious cases on behalf of people and making a change in their lives. Are you involved in lawyer activities outside the firm?
Yeah, one of my favorite organizations outside of the firm is the barristers. You, Larry, have been a great supporter of the barristers. For those that don't know, the barristers organization it's essentially the Black lawyers organization that comes together and tries to help push up the very small but close-knit Black lawyer community in Philadelphia. Thanks to people like yourself, this firm, and a lot of other people, it's a hugely successful organization. Some of the best lawyers in the city are a part of it. It's really great networking for lawyers that have been doing it for a while, for law students. There are meetings monthly. Law students go to these meetings, and I don't know of any other organization where you get such a diverse um, access to different types of lawyers, especially as a law student. So, for example, there are corporate lawyers who are representing like Fortune 100 companies. There are, patent lawyers that are at some of the top, Fox Rothschild, Blank Rome firms. There are government lawyers, DAs. There are U.S. attorneys. There are lawyers that do what we do in the catastrophic injury field. Joe Tucker, he's one of the members there, and you can go to a meeting there, and any type of law you have an interest in, there is a highly successful lawyer in that organization, and everything is designed on trying to just give everybody the ability to do what they want, to learn, to network, to
And to
provide.
mentor, correct?
Yeah, to mentor is probably one of the biggest things that they do, and they at every meeting it's all about finding mentors, and we have the scholarship gala is coming up soon, where you're a big supporter of that, which provides scholarships to underprivileged law students to help them kind of get over that last hurdle in terms of their 3L year and paying for life while they're studying for the bar, things like that. So there are so many lawyers that have gotten their start on their career through the Barristers Organization. It's a hugely successful organization. Every year there's the Martin Luther King breakfast.
How many people were there this year? 700 people?
700. There's, U.S. Senator Bob Casey's there, the mayor Parker's there, council members, judges, federal court judges, appellate court judges. Just everybody goes. It's just a great organization, and I love being a part of it.
And the barristers are also involved in the community too, correct?
Absolutely. One of the biggest events that they do is every year at Thanksgiving, they do the turkey drive. So they accumulate money through donations and through working throughout the year, and they buy thousands of turkeys. And they go out into the neighborhoods, into our community, to the people that need it, and give them full Thanksgiving dinners to make sure that these families can celebrate Thanksgiving just like everybody else. It's incredible. Just I think it was a week or two ago, they did the expungement clinic. So they go out into the neighborhoods again. They get a bunch of volunteer lawyers, all the lawyers in the organization. They go out and just sit in a gym in a school somewhere in Philadelphia and try to help people that have convictions on their record get those convictions expunged so they can move on with their lives, get jobs, support their families, and live just like everyone else. So they do a ton of tremendous work.
And these aren't convictions that are expunged. These are not murder convictions. These are convictions for when somebody's 18 or 19 years old and make a mistake, and that conviction might follow them for a minor infraction the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. I mean, typically the convictions that are expunged are misdemeanors. So they're things like, a retail theft. Somebody, stole a candy bar from a Rite Aid when they were 18. Or they drove in a car that they weren't authorized to drive, even though they weren't actually stealing it. Just relatively minor things. Of course, we don't condone any of that, but when you commit a crime like that, it shouldn't necessarily prevent you from getting a job and paying taxes and being able to live your life and supporting your family. And that's ultimately what ends up happening. I mean, it's hard enough to get a job for some people without a record, and add in a criminal record, and your resume is either going into the trash or the bottom of the pile. And so, the Barristers has done a great job in going out into the community and helping get some of these very low-level crimes off people's record. In order to be eligible, they can't have committed a crime within, I think it's 10 years of it happening. So they've been living very clean lives, not committing crimes, and it's time to take it off the record and let people move on.
And give people a second chance.
Absolutely.
So you talked about some of the cases that you've worked on. Are there cases that you're starting to work on now where you'd actually like to see changes made in our society to help people out?
Yeah, one of the really, this one that it bugs me. I wake up in the middle of the night sometimes thinking about is it's a gentleman who was in the back of a police wagon and was coming back from court. His charges had been thrown out, and he was being transported back to the jail so that he could be released to go home to his three children. And it's called a constable. In Pennsylvania, we actually have elected positions that some of the counties use. They're called Pennsylvania constables, and they essentially do things like court transportation. They protect some of the voting locations. They have various roles like that. This one was in Delaware County, and the constable put this gentleman in the back of one of these transport wagons. No seatbelt even inside of the wagon whatsoever. They essentially just put him in a cage in the back of a wagon and start driving. Um, as sometimes happens, the vehicle got into an accident. Another car T-boned the wagon, hit right where the driver was sitting. That driver was wearing a seatbelt, so he was not injured. But unfortunately, our client was in this metal cage in the rear of the wagon and went headfirst into one of the walls, was rendered fully paralyzed from the neck down, where he lived in a hospital without being able to move any of his limbs for 4 months before he ultimately passed away. It really bugs me that in 2024 we still have transport rides that are planned, that everyone knows is happening. Everyone knew that he had to go to court this day. Everybody knew that he had to come home from court or go back from court after, and they put him in there with no seatbelt. Seatbelts have been required since the 60s, and it's 2024. Why are we still putting people in the back of vehicles with no seatbelts?
And his situation wasn't unusual. They're putting people in these paddy wagons all the time,
Yeah,
correct?
and I did when I heard about this for the first time, it made me think of the Freddie Gray situation in Baltimore, that you'll recall, where it was called a nickel ride, where they'd put people in these paddy wagons and slam the brakes on, and that gentleman was left paralyzed. And it makes you just think, if someone can be paralyzed from sitting in the back of a wagon just from hitting the brakes, imagine what happens when you actually get into an accident. And some of the statistics from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation suggest that when a vehicle is in an accident at just 20 miles per hour, it's the same force as being hit by an elephant. Okay, it's over 20,000 pounds. And that's not something that anybody should have to deal with when they're in the back of a vehicle being transported, without control over their situation. So in this case, I was looking into, how is this happening? Why are we still putting people into the back of these wagons? And I was trying to just get an understanding from the police perspective or from the law enforcement perspective. Why don't you have seatbelts? And some of the arguments that I saw, related to some of these wagons being out on the streets, and if there's a riot or a rally and they have to arrest a bunch of people, they throw them in. I kind of get that. All right, I won't take issue with that at this moment, but my biggest issue is when we have planned rides. We know that
This
this
guy was
person's being
heading
transported.
home, right? This
Yeah,
guy was going back home to his family. He had served his time.
he actually was charged with a crime, went to his preliminary hearing, which in the criminal world is the first hearing where the Commonwealth, the state, puts on their evidence. And if the judge doesn't think that evidence will ever get to a standard of trial, meaning if you don't prove more likely than not they committed the crime, the judge throws it out. And that's what happened in this case. So he was charged, never convicted. The judge heard at the very beginning the claims against him and said, this does not pass muster. These charges are tossed. Send him back to jail where he'll be released. And that was the plan. Everybody knew he was going to be transported. They put him in this car with no seatbelts. As happens, the vehicle was in an accident, and he was the one unseatbelted, and he was the one who suffered the very serious injury. So I'd like to see the state as well as the country put laws into effect that prevent people from being put into the back of these wagons without seatbelts.
When my kids were little, you were talking about it's 2024 and seatbelts are everywhere. And, when my kids were little, there were seatbelts everywhere then. And my kids were put on buses, and you look in the bus doesn't have seatbelts. It's incomprehensible that we put our children or people that are going to or from a criminal facility, that there are no seatbelts. It's ridiculous that we require them in our cars and our trucks and not in the vehicles that take prisoners or take our children.
I agree. I'll play devil's advocate though, just for fun here today. I think the logic behind not putting them in buses is the fact that the students are in this giant yellow, see me bus where they're generally above the average height of other cars. They're in between, and by the way, again, I'm playing devil's advocate
Well,
here,
can't
but
they still get hit? Can't the driver, you know, can't there be an obstruction in the road where the driver swerves and the kids get thrown? It takes a second to put a seatbelt on. You can have the kids in seatbelts. To me, there's no reason, there's no downside. It's just a cost factor. Well, we should spend the money for the safety of our kids, and we should spend the money for the safety of people that are going to or from planned trips to detention facilities.
I can't argue with that. Absolutely. I would love to see that change happen. And, that's something I'm working on. And since you brought it up, it's something that I've been working with CLS on. I'm starting to have those conversations initially. I know you're an avid supporter of CLS as well, Community Legal Services.
Tell us about CLS.
Why don't you? I think this one should be you.
Tell us about CLS.
Okay, so Community Legal Services is another fantastic organization that is just out in the community trying to help the people in Philadelphia. They represent the people that can't afford to have lawyers, the people that have not had the best luck in their lives. They represent them in situations where maybe their landlord is trying to improperly throw them out. Maybe the government improperly cut off some of their benefits. Maybe they are being taken advantage of by some company, and there's a whole class of people who are being taken advantage of. They essentially even the playing field for people that have no shot at ever having legal representation or being able to afford a lawyer. I mean, these lawyers out here charging hourly, their rates are upwards of $1,000 an hour. I mean, even somebody that has a job, a very reputable job, can't afford to pay a lawyer $1,000 an hour. And so CLS, their whole mission is just helping people that could never afford to have a lawyer. Another great organization.
So you did a great job of telling what CLS does. And one of the great things about CLS to me is also, it's not just the person that can't afford the lawyer that's receiving CLS benefits. Let's say that person has a family, has kids that are 8 and 6 years old, and the heat is turned off in that house or that apartment, or that person can't afford food, doesn't get the food stamps that person's supposed to get. Those kids are now affected, and those kids now maybe are going to be cold or going to get sick or aren't going to be able to get to school. So it's multi-generational that I think CLS is helping our city generally, so that people that don't have the same chances that other people have get those chances.
Yeah, and something you mentioned to me the other day, actually, the level of their legal representation, the quality of their legal work is really fantastic, and they have some of the best lawyers in the country that went to Ivy League schools. That when either the state or some of these corporations sees a community legal services entry or a complaint or whatever it is, a communication, they know that they need to cross their T's and dot their I's, because their level of legal work is exceptional. It really is.
Tell us about the ghost guns cases you're working on.
Yeah, that's another one that keeps me up at night. So, I'd say in the early 2000s, firearm manufacturers, this is kind of the backdrop, the context that brings us to where we are today. Early 2000s, the gun lobbyists, the NRA, other organizations successfully convinced Congress to pass laws that granted fairly blanket immunity to gun manufacturers.
And what's immunity?
Immunity meaning they are immune from suit. They cannot be sued except in very, very limited circumstances. So essentially, their gun needs to go off when it's not supposed to, kind of like the SIG cases that we have. But you can't sue them like you can any other consumer product. As far as I know, the firearm industry is the only consumer product industry that has this immunity. So the way they distribute their guns, the manufacturers get immunity. For example, if another company was out selling a product negligently or carelessly or giving it to people they knew were going to commit crimes with it, For example, like the tobacco industry, right? You could sue the manufacturer of a cigarette for the way that they were basically putting this poison into everyone's body. The firearm industry has an immunity that would prevent a similar lawsuit. It's the only industry that has it. So, um, more recently, some manufacturer got this really bright idea in their minds to create gun parts. And they put these gun parts into a box and they sell them as gun parts. They don't have serial numbers. They don't require a background check to purchase, and anybody can buy one. So, for example, a 13-year-old can go onto one of these websites or go to a gun show. They don't have to show identification. They don't have to say who they are. It can be somebody with convictions that would not allow them to otherwise possess a gun. Can just go online and buy these kits. They can build a gun in less than 30 minutes. It really consists of just drilling some pre-marked holes. They give you all the tools. And essentially you have a functioning gun with no serial number, no background check in a matter of 30 minutes. And what we've been seeing happen in Philadelphia is people are going to gun shows. For example, out in Oaks, Pennsylvania, they have one a couple times a year. And they're buying these without the checks, people that aren't allowed to have guns, and they're bringing them into our communities and they're using them to commit violent acts. People are also buying them online. They're shipping them to vacant homes that might be on their block. They will see, USPS or whoever it is drop the gun off. Then they'll run over there, they'll pick it up, and that's a person who should have had a background check, wouldn't have been able to get one, now easily has a gun. So essentially, these manufacturers kind of side-skirted gun laws. And then while they skirted the gun laws, they are trying to hide behind this immunity that the general manufacturers get when other people use the guns to commit crimes. So it's kind of been something that we've been seeing pop up more and more. It kind of got big, and I want to say 2019. And since then, ghost guns have just been getting more and more popular. So we had a case come in where a woman who, I didn't get the chance to meet her. Unfortunately, she was killed, but by all accounts, she was a pillar in the community. She worked at a rec center in Philadelphia. She was shot while at work. It was a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old got into a gang fight and started shooting down the street. And this woman was hit by a stray bullet from their gunfight, and she was killed.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Wrong place, wrong time. She was at work. She has young kids, a tremendous family, really just a beautiful family. And it was devastating, not only to the family, but to the community. This happened at a rec center. This is a place where kids are supposed to go to get away from the violence, right? This is a place where kids are supposed to go where they can, kind of walk away from the stresses and everything pulling them in opposite directions and go and just be kids, just play. And one of the rec center workers, our client, was hit by a stray and she was killed. The 13-year-old had a ghost gun. He's the one who pulled the trigger. And so when this case came in, we really wanted to try to find a way to put a dent in these ghost gun manufacturers. I mean, we want to help our client and her family, but we also want to take down these ghost gun manufacturers because it's truly a despicable business. They are trying to skirt gun laws. They're trying to get more guns into a community that doesn't need any guns. They're trying to put guns in the hands of people that are not legally allowed to possess guns. So, it was a battle from the beginning because of this immunity. And I can't tell you how many hours I spent agonizing over this immunity statute, trying to figure out, how are we going to get past this? How can we bring this case? And one morning in the gym where I do some of my best legal thinking sometimes, I was thinking about the exceptions. And one of them is a violation of state law. And so what this comes down to is, what does the state of Pennsylvania define as a gun? And Pennsylvania, unlike a lot of other states, defines a gun as something that can be readily converted to fire. So it doesn't necessarily need to be an operable gun at the time. And so unlike other states, in Pennsylvania, these kits that these manufacturers are selling that are convertible are actually illegal under Pennsylvania law. And so we are in the process of gearing up to go against one of the major gun manufacturers that are selling these ghost guns and that are really doing devastating damage to our city.
So we're trying to help not just the family of this unfortunate woman who was killed, but make a difference in our society as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think even the average gun owner thinks that this is a good idea. I can tell you that, some gun owners that I know in my personal life, I've spoken to them about it, and they think it's a crazy idea. I mean, the idea that you can just go buy a gun and not have a background check is just, it makes no sense. I don't think even, I don't want to get into what the NRA thinks, who knows, but, it just doesn't make sense.
So you mentioned the professor at Temple that gave you some guidance in your career. Can you talk about some of the people that have influenced you in your life and in your career?
Yeah, I think I'll start in the beginning at the DA's office. So the way the DA's office worked at the time when I was there is very similar to how our firm here works. A very close knit group of lawyers that care very much about representing our clients and their best interests, care very much about being better trial lawyers, having fun while doing it, and just trying to be as successful as possible. And that's something I didn't necessarily see when I was on the defense side, but that's kind of where it started. And, at the DA's office at the time, the way it was set up is you'd be in groups where there'd be some young lawyers, they're called teams, and there would be some of the older lawyers. And there were some lawyers that I remember watching, and they would just go into a courtroom and they could just close for 30 minutes with, they didn't have any of the cool technology that we use to be persuasive. They didn't have any of the, the deposition clips or anything like that. And they could just go in there and be so persuasive for 30 minutes and get juries to really understand very difficult concepts. And so that's kind of where it started for me. And I realized, wow, I want to do that. I want to see how these people do it. I want to learn from them. And I had that opportunity. Then when I came here, I mean, I can't think of a better place for a young lawyer to practice. I mean, between you, Bob Mongaluzzi, some of the other lawyers here, I mean, we get to see firsthand on a daily basis some of the most successful strategies for representing our clients. You and Bob Mongaluzzi obviously do a ton of CLEs and do courses, and you teach at Temple. You taught at Penn State recently. This is all stuff that people get kind of little glimpses of, but young lawyers here, even seasoned lawyers here, get to see it on a daily basis. I don't want to say for free, but we work here, we get access to your office. It's really tremendous just to see, how long you guys have been doing it, seeing how you've been doing it. I read your openings, your closings, I read your depositions. I try to, take strategies you've used in other cases to try to help my clients, and it's invaluable.
Jordan, thanks so much for your time today. You were fantastic and really, I think, helpful to people who are going to listen to the podcast and learn a little bit about you, a little bit about our firm. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I think obviously I look up to you and some of the work you've done, all of the work you've done over the years. As the managing partner, you've over 100 employees working for you. You've been tremendously successful. What gets you up every day? Why do you keep doing it?
Um, I think of several things. The clients. I mean, you talked about representing the clients. It's an important and awesome responsibility. I mean, people come to us who are in the most difficult positions and situations in their lives. Usually, they've been catastrophically injured. Um, they're not able to pay medical bills. They're not able to work again in many situations. And that is an awesome responsibility that I take very seriously. And we do our best to hire people that also take that responsibility very seriously. So that's the first thing. And the people here. I think I'd like to think that we've assembled, like you, a really good group of people who are bright, who are caring, who connect with our clients, who really want to do right for our clients. And like you talked about, when in many situations want to make a positive change in our society. So those are the things that keep me going every day. And I'm very lucky. I look forward to work every day. I look forward to working with the great people here. I look forward to representing our clients.
Is there one case that you've had throughout your career that always pops up back in your mind, for better or for worse? Maybe it was someone you couldn't help the way you wanted to because of limitations in insurance or something like that. Or maybe it's a case where it was a tremendous success. Is there one case that just pops up in your mind all the time?
I think that probably the signature case in my career was the Tropicana garage collapse case in Atlantic City you mentioned Bob Mongaluzzi that Bob and I worked on together. 36 people were injured, 4 people were killed. Um, it was great to work on that case because there were a number of different firms that worked on that case, and we worked collaboratively with other people. There were people that were devastatingly injured. We represented a number of families whose loved ones were killed. And I think we made a very positive change, not only representing those people, but making sure that something like that didn't happen again. The floors literally weren't connected to the walls when concrete was being poured. We emphasized the redundancy of construction, that there have to be multiple sets of eyes looking to make sure that projects are safe. We actually got a letter from the general contractor afterwards, thanking us for really taking their superintendent and their foreman to task and saying, you know what, you were right. We have to do a better job. And if we can help people, and if we can make a difference on construction projects and the streets of Philadelphia and in New Jersey, then we're doing right by people.
Yeah, that was a tremendous result. The last question I have, favorite restaurant in Philadelphia?
Oh, I'm a big fan of Royal Sushi. I'm a big sushi fan. That's my favorite place.
Okay. And you have a pretty good relationship with Jesse.
I do. Jesse Ito was just nominated for Mid-Atlantic Restaurateur of the Year. I think this is the year he wins.
Okay. All right.
All right. So this has been the Salts Mongaluzzi Bendesky podcast, The Real Suits, Champions of the Injured. I'd like to thank my partner and friend, Jordan Howell, for coming on, telling us about himself, telling us about the cases he's worked on and is working on. This is our first episode. If you liked what you heard, please click subscribe. We would like to hear what you have to say, and we'd like to make this as enjoyable and educational for everybody as possible. Please tell us what you think. Please join in. We will be having more episodes with partners and lawyers at our firm and telling you what we do, going behind the scenes, telling you about the cases we are working on. Thanks so much for tuning in.